fighting out of Toronto, Canada. He is the bodybuilding champion of the world, presenting James Hurricane Hergott.
James Hergott here with Love and Muscle, and this is a little bit different than the typical format that I do. For one, I have a shirt on, and for another thing, I'm dealing with a more serious topic. I have a great guest on today, and basically we're going to be talking about family court. We're going to be talking about custody. We're going to be talking about certain rights issues, and I'm actually in family court myself, so that's kind of a personal topic to me, but I really didn't want to focus on me. I wanted to focus on what it's like, because for me, it was completely different than I expected, and I kind of wanted to share that experience of what it's really like so that anybody that's dealing with it, they can kind of have maybe feel that they're not alone in the situation, but also anybody that might face it in the future, they can kind of understand what they're going to be facing, or anybody that could potentially face it kind of being, aware of the pitfalls. So I'd like to welcome Robert Samery, Robert is the chairman of the board and chair of public policy for the Public Policy Committee for the Canadian Association for Equality. And we're really pleased to have you on, Robert. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much for having me, James. It's a great opportunity to talk to you and talk to all the other guys that are on your channel here. I'm really pleased about that. Thanks for having me.
Well, I would like to start by asking you what the Canadian Association for Equality is, and kind of what you endeavor to do with this organization.
Canadian Association for Equality deals with issues around boys and men that generally doesn't get very much attention in the public sphere, is really understudied, and has a very big negative effect on society as a whole, families as in particular, but boys and men as the main target. And we deal with things, as you talked about, family court issues where men in particular don't have equality of outcome, certainly, as women do. Our court system is generally a good system, but it has some faults and it has some problems, and this is certainly one of them. We also deal with domestic violence as it relates to boys and men, because that really has historically not gotten the kind of attention that it needs, that it deserves, and we know that a lot of men are victims of domestic violence, and very often they're denigrated for raising the issue. We talk about education issues where boys aren't given the same quality of learning as girls are, and as a result drop out of high school at much higher rates and don't show up in university. They don't get the post-secondary education that girls do, because they're just not interested in learning in the kind of environment that they're presented with. We talk about health issues around men. So men kill themselves. Suicide rate among men is 3 times as high as it is among women, and there are no services that are available to deal with that. We also know that 99% of workplace fatalities, people that are killed in the worksite, 99% of them are men. We don't deal with those sorts of things in the general population either. Those are things that, if the tables were turned and women were suffering in the same kinds of ways, there would be an outcry that no government could hold back from. But for some reason, boys and men are generally more disposable, or at least we're told that we should think of them as that, and we don't pay attention to it. So in addition to the very major issue that you bring to the table about family law, there are a number of other issues that we deal with as well.
Yeah, and to me this is really important because, being a somewhat masculine male, and to give some background on myself, if you're coming from Robert's site or some other way that you're coming upon this, I've been a filmmaker since, my first movie was in theaters in 2005. I've done a bunch of projects. A lot of my projects have been movies and TV stuff to do with like UFC, MMA, bodybuilding, fitness. So let's say very kind of masculine driven, sports or activities. So I've always been interested in masculinity and its role in society. And I've been around very masculine men. And so it's an issue that fascinates me. And this actually came to my attention before I was even involved in my own situation. And I'm really like interested in statistics and things like that. When I saw these statistics, I was really shocked. So I'm going to throw some numbers out there. And of course, I'm going by, these are backed by sources, but I'm throwing them out there. So if I mess anything up, I apologize, but maybe you can let me know if I'm wrong about any of these, but these are shocking to me. And I just kind of want to throw out there some statistics about fatherlessness. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. 90% of all homelessness and runaways are from fatherless homes. 85% of children who exhibit behavioral disorders are from fatherless homes. 71% of high school dropouts are from fatherless homes. 70% of youth in state institutions are from fatherless homes. 70% of adolescent patients in substance abuse centers are from fatherless homes. Truancy and poor academic performance. 71% of high school dropouts are from fatherless homes. Delinquency and youth crimes. 85% of youth in prison have an absent father. And it basically goes down the list. I mean, kind of and a lot of this stuff is on, kind of like the CDC websites and censuses and things like this. It's all government studied things. And what's really shocking to me is that it wasn't something like I learned from the media, but it's clear to me that fathers not being in a picture hugely impact the outcome of children and those children as they grow into adulthood. Do you have any comment on that, Robert?
We haven't studied the effects of fatherlessness on children as much as we've studied the benefits of mothers on children. There are a number of people that are now doing that. Kyle Pruder from Yale is an amazing source of information for why fathers are important in children's lives. And we're finding things, or he's finding things, as well as a number of other people. He's not the only one doing this. I just know that he has done amazing work. Not only is it on a social scale that children benefit from having fathers around, but on a biochemical scale too. So what that means is that particularly in infancy, when a father is in close proximity to their child, chemically the child's hormones change. This is not something that the child wants to do. It's not something that the child learns to do. It's a natural reaction. So there's something different about a father than anyone else that causes things inside the child to change chemically. There are lots of examples like that. One example that I can use on the social scale, though, is quite telling. I like to use this quite a bit. If you want to know what the difference between having a father and having a mother is, and as egalitarian as I am, there is a difference between fathers and mothers toward a child. Go to any playground and watch what happens on that really tall slide. You get the mothers at the bottom of the ladder, standing there, getting ready to catch that kid if he slips, if he falls, just as a cushion, as a safety net for that child. And you go to the other end of the slide, at the bottom of the slide, and you got the dad there encouraging the kid to go higher, to take risk, not to be cushioned, not to be a safety net, and you need both. You need someone who's going to be there to encourage you to take risk, And you need someone there in case there are pieces, and to stop those pieces from shattering. And both of them are equally important. Both of them are absolutely necessary to a well-developed child. So we tend to see fathers as being the defenders, as being the supporters. And sometimes that can be seen as an unhealthy thing. For example, as a defender, we see fathers as being disposable. We couldn't do otherwise. I mean, to have fathers go into war, fathers, men, make up the vast majority of soldiers. They certainly make up the vast majority of targeted soldiers. And if we didn't see them as being disposable, as being, well, that's what they do, that kind of sexist role of their bodies as not being as useful as a mother who can bear children, we wouldn't be able to send men out into war. So we look at them as being disposable. As providers, they're the ones, men are typically seen as those who are supposed to write the check, who are supposed to put the roof over your house, supposed to keep the fridge filled with food. Not necessarily as the ones who are nurturing, the ones who make that chemical change in that infant. Those are, for me, problematic issues, both sides of it, the disposability and the lack of being able to raise children.
Yes, and I could personally attest to the whole playground thing, because I know with my ex, I went to play with my daughter one time, and I put her on my shoulders for a piggyback ride, and my ex started freaking out. You know, you're gonna drop her, this is gonna happen, and stuff like that. And certainly there's complete differences between men and women, and what they bring to the table. And you're absolutely right that both are needed. And my personal view, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I view it that somewhere along the line, men kind of got thought of as, like you were saying, as the provider, that they provide money, and the woman is the nurturer. So therefore, when we enter a court system, we need child support from the man, and we need the woman to be raising the child. And in that equation, what it seems to me wasn't factored in was the role of the father in the actual development of the child, which we're now figuring out. And it seems to me that's a very colossal error, because now we have more single families than ever before. We have declining birth rates, and we have more fatherlessness than ever before. So you're essentially having an environment now where this experiment, because let's face it, the statistics I heard are that 70% of divorces are initiated by women. And I have to assume that a portion of that reason that it's to such a high degree is because they know that the court system is going to protect them and look after their interests. So you essentially have a situation where you have men participating less and less. And of course, when a child goes to school, the majority of the teachers are women. So there's actual situations where they're what's called man deserts, where there's basically areas where, especially in impoverished areas, where it's almost all single moms, and then the teachers are moms, and there's no positive male influences at all. So, kind of walk me through how this came to be, that there was this thought process, and how kind of flawed it is, and what that's going to mean for the future.
Well, I can do that in two ways. I can do that in a historical context. So I'll do that very quickly. We started off, a couple of hundred years ago, where children were property, and they were owned by men, which, currently would be a horrible thing to contemplate or to do. It softens a little bit if you add to that the man was also responsible for making sure that the child, and his wife, by the way, were cared for, which is why women didn't get credit, because they weren't responsible for paying back whatever it was that they were borrowing or using. So we went from a time where children were the property of men, and when divorce was very rare, men still held on to their property. Up to probably 60, 70 years ago, when we started talking about the best interest of the child, the early nurturing of children, and that was assumed to be best done by the mother. And we had gotten rid of that property notion of children. So women, mothers, had custody of children because they were the nurturers. They started off in infancy, went through early development, and the child became much more used to the woman, to the mother, than they did to the father, and it became natural just to continue that on so that the child didn't have a break. And we're kind of still in that area. We're moving away from it to some extent, but we're still in that area. But you raised the issue of fatherlessness in families. And I'm afraid that without more comment on that, many people will start to think, well, yeah, but why don't we work on men wanting to be dads and wanting to be involved in their kids' lives? I mean, these dads that just give up, that just leave their pregnant girlfriends, their pregnant wives, to fend for themselves are horrible individuals, and we got to change all of that. Well, I can tell you that that's a very small minority of how children become fatherless. There's an awful lot of other ways that children become fatherless. Probably the biggest way is the one that you're talking about now, and through the family court, the legal way. So children of conflict, of high conflict, or even no conflict, divorce, are taken out of the lives of their father because the mother is the better person to do it. Men only get sole custody 7% of the time through the court process. And that drives the non-court process because that's hanging over everybody's head. What's going to happen if we do go to court? So if you don't want to go to court, you can avoid it, but you're going to wind up giving similar kinds of things, or you'll wind up in court to give them anyway. So that's probably the largest single factor of why children become fatherless. There's also paternity fraud, where men don't know that they have children, where mothers intentionally put either no father or the wrong father on a birth certificate. And that's extremely damaging, certainly to the health of the physical health of that child when they grow older and they don't know what their genetic makeup is or what their family health situation was. Those are very difficult circumstances. There's also times, and this is probably more nefarious, where mothers try to become pregnant in order to get child support, in order to get government child support from as many different fathers as they possibly can. And that makes for, a child not having a single father, maybe growing up with many different men in that father role, and eventually, not having fathers that they can rely on as well. So there are lots of reasons why children become fatherless, and families become fatherless.
Yes, I agree with that, and I've witnessed several of those things. I've witnessed in my personal life women getting pregnant on purpose to keep the father or to collect child support. I've witnessed or spoken to people that have had false paternity, that have been told they're the father and been lied to about that. And I think one of the sad things about this is that it's become customary in our society to assume that women are all virtuous and that men are not virtuous. And the reality is that there's women that can be just as cruel, if not crueler in many situations than men. And just kind of this halo effect that we put upon people. We have to judge people as individuals. And there's people that are capable of all kinds of shady behavior, let's call it. And one of the things that kind of disturbs me about this whole situation is, well, the welfare state. So, for example, I actually know of a woman who had 4 children from 4 different fathers and was essentially making approximately $2,000 a month just from collecting from the government for those children. She was also collecting child support, and she was living in subsidized housing, but they would pay for the electricity but not the heat. So what she did is she put generators all throughout the house that were like electrical. So essentially she was able to live around a $5,000 a month lifestyle without having to work or anything like that. Her work was essentially having children. And that may sound like all good and stuff like that, but as you know, there's always sort of the moral hazard of these situations. And one of the moral hazards is these children. And they're growing up without fathers, and now you have irresponsible people raising children, and those children are growing up in that environment and seeing that, and they think that this is totally acceptable. And what happens is, like, I actually know of very responsible parents that would like to have more children but can't afford it because, you know, they're paying taxes, they have lives, they're responsible people. And then you have people like this that are utilizing and misusing the system to have children. And, you know, it's kind of been romanticized being a single mom. And I'm not saying it's not difficult being a single mom. I'm not saying it's not hard, but it's romanticized to the point that it's almost like a man is not needed. And now we're finding out statistically that that's simply not true. And if, like, all these statistics that I'm saying are correct about suicide and crime and stuff like that, well, you can see in poor communities where there's less fatherlessness, there's a huge amount of crime and lack of education. Whereas in, like, let's say systems where, you know, religion is more of a factor, or there's a higher income and families are more staying together, you see a much better outcome for those children. And it kind of makes me wonder, what are the messages that we're sending to the future? What is the generation of the future that we're creating through sort of this moral hazard that we've created?
Well, I think, you know, you've touched on something that was really explicit over the last number of years, and that is to destroy the family. There's no need for a family. You can do this on your own. You know, you don't need a man to have children. We very rarely talked about not needing a woman to have children, but we always talked about not needing to have a man. You can do it by yourself. You know, Women's Lib started off saying you can have it all. You can have a fantastic work career. You can have a very gratifying work life. You can have children. You can raise them. You can do it all, and you don't even need a man. You can do it on your own. So that was a very explicit message. I think I agree with you that that's certainly proving to not be a good message, and I don't think that it works. And on top of that, I think the statistics are that women are not happier and that they're less happy with all of that going around as well. You touched on something else that I wanted to make comment that just slipped from me for a second, so I may get back to it.
Well, I want to caution people about something, because, you know, we're talking a lot about men, but, like, I'm very concerned about society overall. So as you know, like, a lot of the times there's sort of a rebound effect of things.
James?
Yeah.
I got it back.
Okay, go for it.
You're talking about the woman that you know that has 4 kids and is living at the expense of the state and I guess the men that are giving her child support. I wanted to comment on that because the child support system, the government child support system, was set up because there were women that found themselves with their children without any support, without a husband or a father or anyone who could support them, and they were in horrible, horrible conditions. And society thought that it was not right to leave these mothers and their children on the streets to fend for themselves. So in cases where it wasn't planned, but it happened, either through divorce, which was quite rare, or through death, which was also quite rare, or through any other number of circumstances, someone couldn't help themselves, but found themselves in these circumstances. It was not so that someone could rely and plan on making themselves, as you put it, have a job of creating babies in order to have an income. That's not why the system was put together. And you rightly point out that some people are gaming the federal government and their support for single moms and their kids over that stuff. That's what I wanted to. That's what I forgot that I wanted to put in there.
Yes, and I actually know multiple people like this. I know people think, well, this doesn't really happen. No, I know people that are this. I know of multiple people, of multiple women in their 30s who live solely off the system, off of assisted housing. And of course, the argument's going to be made, well, we can't pull these people off the system. We can't, what's going to happen to these horrible people? But 2 points on that. One, of course, this is taxpayer money. So somebody like you or me that goes out and works a meaningful job is subsidizing this. And then the second part of this is you're enabling these people to never have to learn any skills. So you're infantilizing them. You're basically treating them like they're such buffoons that they never have to participate in real life. And to me, it may seem to them like they're getting an advantage by, hey, I'm gaming the system, when in result, they're not having any skills developed. And then when those children leave, what happens to them when they're in their 40s or 50s and their children have moved on and they've never grown as people? So there's all kinds of moral hazards created by artificially just throwing money at problems and thinking that's going to fix something. And one thing I want to point out about all of this is, while we're talking about men and stuff like that, and this is 100% real, there's a huge backlash out there. So in other words, imagine World War II and you see the guys that come off the boat and they're just mowed down. They're just shot. And then the guys at the back of the boat that are going to be coming off, they're like, I don't want this happening to me. And my father went through a divorce. I've gone through a custody situation myself now. And I can tell you, I have many men that I know who are saying, I'm never getting married. I'm never having kids. I know men that they go out and they have vasectomies and they lie about it. They just pretend that it didn't happen. And there's movements. There's, as you know, MGTOW, men opting out, and this is a huge problem in Japan. It's a problem here. And and when I'm in the dating scene, there's a lot of women in their 40s, like just kind of desperately looking for a man to marry them. And there's men that are just like, screw that. And when I had to do my personal court thing, and you have to do the MIP, which is sort of a mandatory thing, they're kind of explaining divorce and all this stuff. And I was thinking, this is something that should be explained to people that are about to get married. Because if somebody heard the way that they're explaining it, nobody would ever get married. And the moral hazard of this is you're essentially going to have a society where men are going to opt out. They're going to say, I'm not getting married. I'm not going to have children. I'm not going to participate in this. If they develop the male pill, you're really going to have a problem with it. And, then what's going to happen in terms of birth rates? Where are the new taxpayers? Where are the new families of tomorrow that are going to raise healthy children? So for every action, there's a reaction. And this is something I can personally see from a lot of friends. And again, being in these different worlds of bodybuilding and fitness and MMA and being around a lot of kind of alpha males, I know a lot of people that are just saying, never going to happen. And if you take out all the incentives for something to happen, people will just stop participating. And I'd like to get your comments on that. Sorry for my long rant.
No, it's great. I agree with you entirely. This is not just I started off saying that this is a societal issue. These things are not good for society in general, and families are being harmed by this too. And what you're pointing out is that not only are families going to be harmed, but they're not going to be existing. There's not going to be any families around. There's a lot of social change that's happened extraordinarily quickly over the last 50, 60, 70 years, far outpacing any kind of social change for thousands and thousands of years. And I don't know how people think that society in general can handle those kinds of change. I could go even further than you've gone by saying, guys don't want to be involved in marriage. Guys don't want to be involved in kids because they're getting nailed for it. Well, that's on the stick end. On the carrot end, it's getting easier and easier to go satisfy those human urges that otherwise make kids. And you don't need to make kids to satisfy those urges anymore. So there's a lot of things coming together, and they're quite harmful, as you say. I agree with you.
Yeah, and I think this is something that people don't really think about the impact. But I can tell you, dating women that are in their 40s, they're like, where are the good men out there? Nobody wants to get married. Nobody wants to settle down. These men won't grow up. I mean, there's a great book. I think it's called not Men Opting. Oh, Men on Strike, right? That goes into these issues a lot deeper. But this is really prevalent. I can see it firsthand. And again, something has to be incentivized for something to happen. And if you just have it where men are looking at like, okay, I get into a situation, there's a 70% chance that the woman's going to leave me. And then if that happens, the court system is going to screw me. It's kind of like, I guess it'd be the point of like, why would I do this? Like, why would I get into a car if there's a 70% chance I'm going to get into an accident? And if I get into an accident, no ambulance is going to show up, And, I think that families really are core. I really think you need a man and a woman to influence children. I mean, think about this. If you have a boy and he becomes a teenager, an adolescent, unless he has, and this is one of the reasons, by the way, that like the UFC and MMA really grew, is because boys have a desire to be playful, to roughhouse, to have all these things, and it's been kind of so stripped out of them through schools and stuff like that, not to be a certain way, that it almost, the UFC in that was kind of a reaction to that, because it was like men wanted to feel like men again, and participating or watching that kind of thing kind of drew that out. But if you don't have good male role models that are teaching these children how to be, boys have testosterone. Boys have a certain aggressiveness. That's why they're good at going to war and all these things. And if you don't funnel that in a positive direction, then you're going to have what you have in a lot of these poor communities, where you have crime, you have petty crime, you have kids acting out and stuff like that. And I think it's very important for men to be there for boys. Then you have women. And I know that there's a lot of statistics in this regard where if there's no father in the picture, and I know part of this is the biological aspects you're talking about, teenage girls are more likely to become promiscuous at a younger age without a father. They're less likely to respect fathers. Men. They're less likely to respect themselves. They're more likely to end up as single moms. And if you end up as a single mom, good luck going to school and all this other stuff if you're a teenager and you get locked in these situations. So I have to wonder, what's the society that we're creating by all of this? Like, I really think that the core nuclear family is key to basically the fundamentals of society. And I feel when you pull that and the community out, you're basically pulling the underpinnings of the society out. And then we start to see all these negative things happen. And I think a lot of it can be traced back to that core family falling apart.
I can't agree with you more. I want to switch a little bit from the aggressiveness that you talked about in men to the risk-taking rather than the aggressiveness. And it's that role model of being able to take risk. And it's what we want. It's what we want in our soldiers. We want them to take huge risks, the ultimate risk, right? You can't take a bigger risk than being a soldier out there. But we also need that in our police departments. We also need that in our fire departments, in our ambulance departments, first responders, high risk. We need that in people. We need role models that show how you can take those risks in a calculated way so that they're minimized and the benefits come out. I happen to have the book you were talking about here, so I just wanted to show everybody in case you wanted to find it. So it's called Men on Strike, with the subtitle, Why Men Are Boycotting Marriage, Fatherhood, and the American Dream, and Why It Matters by Dr. Helen Smith. So that's what you were talking about. I think it's a great book, and it's a good one to push. I also wanted, while I got that, I brought out another by a fellow by the name of Warren Farrell, The Myth of Male Power, which is also an excellent book, talks a great deal about why we think that men are different than they really are, and some of the ways that we can change that. There are a number of other publications like this, books like this. There are lots and lots of them, but these happen to be two of them. You brought up one, and I wanted to bring up the other. So having role models is crucial, not only to boys, and having male role models is crucial not only to boys. It's also crucial to girls. Girls have difficulty with authority figures, with men that go through their lives for the rest of their lives if they don't have male role models, good role models. They don't know what a good, loving relationship is like with a man if they don't see what a man does in a good, loving relationship. These statistics about fatherlessness in families, fatherlessness for children, are really very disturbing. And we have to do what we can to stop that.
Yeah, yes, I agree. And one thing that, just to show how kind of far society has gone, is that it's encouraged. And I've heard women who, let's say they haven't met the right guy, and for whatever reason, and they're in their 40s, and they're thinking about getting artificially inseminated. So they're basically choosing to be single moms. And this is something that within our media and stuff like that is encouraged. And to me, it's kind of a very selfish thing, because it's like, to them, it's almost like getting a puppy, in the sense that, not that they wouldn't care for the child and stuff like that, but they're thinking about them. They're thinking about, I want a child. They're not thinking about, is this the best environment for the child to be raised in? And, I just think that kind of shows the tone of our society and media, and what they think about fathers when they start, advocating for that.
Yep, you're right.
So,
You're right.
And I don't want to get too much into my personal situation, so I'll just speak. One of the things that shocked me about family court is when my ex and I separated, and we went to family court, which I would have avoided at all costs. And I understand there's a statistic that almost all of the family court cases are brought by women. It's very high, whatever it is. You probably know better than I, but I think it's
I think it's closer to 80%.
80%, yes. So 80%. So case brought against me. Well, I would have just wanted to talk it out, but in any case, obviously there's an incentive to do so. But in my situation, I thought, since it's 50% my DNA, 50% woman's DNA, I would go into court and we get the kid 50% of the time. And what I found out, here is my personal experience for 4 months. I had supervised daytime visitations on certain days, and I had to basically drive an hour in, pick up my daughter, drive an hour back, and repeat that throughout the day. Whereas my ex, and I have no criminal arrest, I've never been, never hurt anybody, I've never been accused of abuse, nothing. But just the presumption was that the woman in the situation could have the child and allow the child to stay with the grandparents or friends or whoever, it doesn't matter. And with me as the father, I had to be supervised. I had to essentially pay my dues for months without having my daughter overnight. This is coming from a situation where I was around my daughter basically 24/7. So imagine for my daughter, all of a sudden, where's dad? Why does dad only get to come during days? It's kind of this bizarre thing. But what got me was that I was shocked that I thought hey, we have equality now, feminism changed everything. So, hey, we would just split the child 50-50. And I came to find out that wasn't the case. And I wanted to ask you kind of why that is, why there's not automatic shared parenting, and why it seems so kind of like weird and biased when I didn't expect any of that.
Well, first of all, I think we can all agree, at least I hope we can, that the best parents are both parents. And if you can manage to parent along with the child's mother, then that's the best set of circumstances for a kid. And that's not always the case, and sometimes you can't parent together with the child's other parent, and you have to make other kinds of arrangements. But what you're asking me is, why is it that a guy who happens to have a lot of muscle, who happens to care about how he looks and what kind of health he's in, why is it that he is kind of given a discount for being a good parent because he's taking care of himself like that? And I think part of the answer is that we've grown up with this myth that it's men who can become angry, it's men who can become violent, it's men who can not be thinking about the consequences of violent actions that they take against other people, including their own children. And these are all myths. Number one, a very, very, very small minority of men actually fit into that category. And it's unwise, unjust, unfair, and wrong to say that men in general have these kinds of characteristics. The second thing is that as many men that do fall into that category, as many men as there are that fall into that category, there are an equal number of women that fall into that category. But we don't look at that. And all of this is characterized. I heard someone talk about access to justice. And they made the point that, it's very difficult for most people to get into court. You need a lawyer. If you don't have a lawyer, you're really behind the eight ball. If you can't afford a lawyer, that's a real impediment to getting justice. If you get into court without a lawyer, that's a huge impediment to getting any kind of justice. And people just don't go through the court system because they don't have the possibility of getting into court with any real chance. And those are access to justice issues. But on the other hand, if when you do get into court, the overwhelming understanding is that, for example, in this kind of case, it's men who are violent and can cause the most violence to their children. It's untrue, but there are very few statistics around that because people don't look into it. They look into why men are violent. They don't look into why women are violent. They look into why women are not violent. To not have those studies done is equally an access to justice issue, because you can't rely on statistics that are not there. You have to rely on the statistics that are there. And when you don't have the statistics about how gentle men are and how violent women are, you don't get the right outcomes in the justice system. So why is it that men get full custody 7% of the time? That's one of the reasons. That men don't have access to justice in the same way that women do, because the statistics just aren't available. It's not that they don't exist.
But sorry to interrupt, but why would there be any presumption at all? Why don't we judge, if we're supposed to have an equal society, why don't we judge people on their own merits instead of as groups? Certainly it would be extremely racist to say, well, this is a black individual, so we believe that they're going to be more violent. So if it's a white parent, we'll put it with a white parent. I mean, I'm 40 years old. Just my specific situation, I went to Iraq as part of a filming thing in an active war zone, I was cleared by the Pentagon to go there. I've gone through every background check as a result of that. In my 40 years, I've never been arrested for a crime. Nobody's ever alleged that I ever hurt or assaulted them or anything. I come from a good background. My father was an airline pilot for 30 years. My mother was a teacher for 50 years. So, why would you presume anything about anyone without any evidence to the contrary?
For two reasons. It's easier and it's safer. On the face of it, it looks like you're not causing any harm to the child by excluding this potential risk. The risk is far less, or so the myth goes, if you leave the child in more of the care or more time in the care of the mother. It's safer. It's presumed to be safer. It looks like it's safer. I don't think that there are too many people that you would stop on the street that would argue with that. It's untrue, but I think we generally have that understanding. The same goes for it being easier. You got to do a lot of work to make sure that you're not making a mistake. And I'm talking about judges. It's easier for judges to do this. Judges are people. Judges are fallible, but they also have they're being trained, and they're not trained to understand that men and women are far less likely to be violent than they are to be violent, and that men and women are equally capable of being violent to each other. They don't have that training for the reasons that I gave you, that nobody's doing the studies, very few people are doing the studies, and the studies are not made available to them. It's not a satisfactory answer, James. It doesn't satisfy me, and I don't expect it to satisfy you or anybody else, but I think that's the answer.
Yes, and one of the scary things about this is, it's easy to paint somebody like myself, especially in our system, that they're the violent individual, or that they could become violent or anything like this. And of course, there's weapons that anybody can use. But what really the truth is, let's face it, and this, because the court system is biased, most of the time it's not an OJ situation where the man goes out and harms the wife or the child. Who is it, Robert, that the men usually harm when the court system goes bad?
Themselves.
Right. And what are the statistics on that?
We don't know because we don't follow those things. Nobody's done the studies on them, but it's overwhelming that the 75% of suicides that are men happen at times of vulnerability, like divorce or separation. And I can't give you numbers because I don't have numbers. I don't think anybody's put those numbers together, but I don't think anybody would argue. People that are in the business of understanding suicide, people wouldn't argue that that's the most vulnerable time. I think we know that men tend to successfully suicide at two different times, in their youth and in their 50s and older, which is when they tend to separate. And unlike women, men generally don't have a support system, a social support system. They're not as social animals as women are, who have lots of friends, who have lots of support, who build that up, who seek it out and make sure that they have it. So in times of vulnerability, women have the support system that men just don't have.
Right, and one of the things I'm concerned about is, obviously, I'm somebody, I wish to stand up for myself, and regardless of what happens, no matter how unfair a system is, I'm going to be the type of person that I'm going to fight back. I'm also the type of person where, not to be egotistical, but I'm able to do this in front of a camera, so I'm not shy. I'm able to articulate a position and things like that. But what about men out there who maybe they work a construction job or whatever, and they get into a family court system? Maybe they can't really represent themselves. They're not great at speaking. They don't have a lot of confidence, and they just opt out. I mean, how easy is it for a man to be faced with these things and just say, you know what, I'll just pay the child support and I'll just screw this and walk away. And those are the people that I'm concerned about, that you touched upon, where you said fatherlessness doesn't just happen because somebody walks away. In this case, they may walk away because they're getting into a situation where they're trying to see their child, and they're facing such opposition from not only the mother, but also the court system is against them as well. And they just see it as, I mean, we're trained, or sorry, I should say we're educated to have a fear of authority. So you get into a system and you're like, oh, well, this authority is pushing back against me, and they just kind of bend to it and whatever it says, and they just kind of...
These men are not opting out. These men are being pushed out. It's not simply because, the mother of the child is trying to push them out. It's not simply because the court system is stacked up against them. It's systemic. It's everything from the do-good neighbor who says, calm down, just make things, smooth things over, don't get into conflict with her because it's going to just back off, ease up, step aside. It's the mental health workers, it's the assessors, it's the police. The police will not support or will not enforce an access order unless they're forced into it. They will support, and the government has other agencies that support support orders, so payments, money, but not access orders. And I'm going to shock you, James. I'm giving you a trigger warning here now. All right, it's good. You talk about the construction worker. You talk about the manual laborer who just doesn't have the capability. Maybe he doesn't have the worldliness, the education, the experience to go stand up for himself and his child in court. I can give you a number of examples of professionals, lawyers, who can't stand up for themselves in their own cases, mental health workers who are there to support broken families and to put families back together, who couldn't support themselves in court. And it all goes back to the same thing that's systemic. We're taught to not hit women. We're taught to be nice to women. We're taught that women are delicate and they will fall apart if we are overly aggressive. We don't have the support of all of those agencies that I mentioned early on, and we don't have the support of the court system. It's difficult to stand up to all of that. So it doesn't matter whether you're a menial laborer or a sophisticated professional. It's stacked against you, and you have to have some sort of extraordinary ability. And by extraordinary, I mean bigger than average ability to stand up for your child and yourself in family court. Okay, end of trigger warning. You can step back out again.
That is a scary thing. And one thing that gets me is when you're talking about like treating women a certain way and delicate stuff like that, that's a very condescending outlook. In fact, I would describe that as being sexist. I mean, to me, if the feminism really was truly to play out as it had, depicted itself, then women are strong and they're able to, be able to do what they need to do. They're not these like delicate people that. Yeah.
The truth is that they do. They are equally as violent as men are. We're socialized to not believe that, though. The point is, we're talking now in November of 2016. About a month ago, the Canadian government, the Ministry of Health, came up with a document that said domestic violence is a serious health issue, that women and girls are vulnerable in ways that we really have to deal with. The statistics that they used to support that showed the opposite, that there were 4 men for every 3.5 women who were victims of domestic violence, the headline was Girls and Women at Risk of Domestic Violence. Okay? So the truth is not what we think it is. Socializing women to be equals to men used to be what feminism was about. It no longer is. We've gone through 2 waves of feminism since that, and it's not even pretending to say that we want men and women to be equal. It's saying that we want equal outcomes for men and women, and they do it in ways that I think are more power hungry and give women a higher place in society, not an equal place in society.
Yeah, and that I agree. And one sad thing about this, like I come in the bodybuilding world, I cover a lot of women who compete, and there's various divisions of bodybuilding. So there's all fitness and figure, and different ones require a different level of muscle. I have a lot of friends that are women who are very strong and very capable, and a lot of the women I've dated in my life have been, doctors and lawyers. As you indicated, the majority of people graduating university now are women. So I know all kinds of really strong women in my life. So I'm a bit shocked by the fact that the women are looked down upon in the court system as that they're such weak creatures. And I find it, doing an injustice to them as well as to the men, as well as to the guise of equality overall.
Right.
And further to that point, we've been talking about abuse and the presumption of abuse within the family court system. Well, there's another form of abuse that I understand, which is family alienation, parental alienation, which you're familiar with. I don't think very many people that would view this would be familiar with this, so I want to get into it. So tell us, Robert, what is parental alienation, and how does it affect the children, and how is it perpetrated, so to speak?
Well, parental alienation is a very damaging set of circumstances where typically it's one parent, doesn't have to be a parent, but it's typically one parent who, through various ways of psychological and other manipulations, removes entirely or to a great extent a child from the life of a previously loving and caring parent for unjustifiable reasons. So there are cases, and I have to say this because people always jump on it, there are cases where one parent or the other is not a suitable parent, and the child may be better off with less time with that parent than others. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about a case where one of the parents is unsuitable. We're talking about a case where parents are suitable. They may not be the best parents in the world, but there really can only be one set of parents like that. The rest of us are probably just good enough parents. We have our down times when we're not quite as good. We have our better times when we're a lot better. And that's kind of the category that most of us fall into. So these kinds of situations typically happen around separation and divorce. Often they start before that, but there are many objective behaviors that are used by parents to try and separate the child. I spoke about one of them, and that is to tell the child that the other parent is a danger, that the child has to be fearful of that parent, and no good will come from spending time with the parent. I talked about another where a child is told that the other parent doesn't love them. Maybe the child was told that the parent wanted to have an abortion or to abort that child before they were born and never really wanted to have them. Taking all the pictures of that other parent out of frames, cutting them out of dual pictures, not giving over presents, telling the child that the parent's going to show up, knowing that it's not the time for the parent to show up, or that the parent had had reason to not be able to show up. giving the child reason to grow up understanding that it's bad to have that parent around, and more, and this is what's very damaging, that if the child shows some kind of pleasure out of spending time or being with that parent, that they are going to harm the other parent. So the one parent who is typically the custodial parent is going to be very upset, is going to be hurt if the child gives stories of enjoying the other parent's time. Briefly, that's kind of what parental alienation is.
Yeah, and I'll give you kind of a shocking story that I'm personally aware of. I actually know of so this guy had children from a previous relationship. He got married, his wife left him, and even though the biological mother and father was still alive, the ex-wife got custody of 2 of the children. And it was because she had manipulated the children to say to the court, oh, I want to go with her. So we're talking about somebody who was not the biological father or mother, both of them still present in existence, and some other woman who happened to be married to the father was raising those children.
Yeah. Well, I can unfortunately give you lots of cases. One in particular, you shake your head. This was a case of a mom not telling the man that he was going to be a father, but he found out in any event just before the birth was going to happen. He rushed to the hospital, said, I'm the dad, and the hospital said, well, maybe you are, but she's saying that she doesn't want anything to do with you, so this is a hospital. We're not going to allow that to happen. Within 2 weeks, the mom, who didn't want the child in the first place, gave the child up for adoption. The dad had to prove his paternity. Once he proved his paternity, he had to go after the adoptive parents, who were financially far better off than he was, had a far better social class than he had, but it was his child. And this story doesn't conclude because unfortunately he died in a car accident before it ended. But before he died, the adoptive parents said, if you're going to put us through all of this, we'll play ball with you. And they started to sue him for child support because he was the biological dad, refusing to give him any access, refusing to give him any fathering role, but demanding that he open his wallet. You got to shake your head. And he was fighting this the whole way through. There was no presumption that because he was the dad, he was entitled to parent that child. And those sorts of things, not to that extreme, but those sorts of things happen daily.
It's really sad, and it is a form of abuse because ultimately, even though the courts say that they're doing what's best for the child, I feel that the children aren't really taken into account in these situations. Before I get on a broader scope of what can be done, is there anything that men can do who are facing this in the system? Is there any place they can go for assistance? Is there anything that you recommend? What could they do? Because it seems kind of like a task that's very hard to get around. And if you have a mother that's determined to have sole custody or to cut the father out, it seems like there's not a lot of options for the man. Is there any advice you can give?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that it's getting better. It's not good enough, but it's getting far better. So the longer you can delay these kinds of issues, I think the better off your kid will be. The second thing is, don't go to court. Try and resolve these issues amicably. Maybe give up a little bit more than you otherwise really want to give up. But having the kid with a great relationship with both parents is worth a great deal, and you should be willing to give up some of that to have that outcome. So there are other options outside of going to court. There are mediation, arbitration kinds of circumstances where you don't need a judge, but you can have either lawyers or people that are well trained in mediation arbitration. So that's number one. Number two, if you can't do those things, get a good lawyer. And money talks. It's not a great thing to hear, but good lawyers have a lot of people that are going after them. One of the ways they hone down their client pool is by taking people that can afford them better than other people. So unfortunately, money will help you in these kinds of circumstances, and a good lawyer will guide you through the process. He will most likely get you a family assessor, a child assessor, someone who will look at the circumstances of the family and your role in that set of circumstances. But you still have to be very careful that, number one, the lawyer that you choose and the assessor that you choose or he chooses understands parental alienation, understands what father's roles in the family are, and that you can't take that for granted. These are all people. Judges are people. We went through that. Many of them do not understand those circumstances or the father's role, and you have to make sure that they do, which means that you have to know what all that is about too, what parental alienation is about, what the father's role is and the benefits of having a father involved in a child's life and the detriments of not having that father involved in a child's life. And I can also tell you that among the things that you should do with an assessor is to mandate them, in addition to all the other things that they're mandated to do and they're going to tell you they will do, is to ask them to make sure they look for and diagnose parental alienation in the family. And if they don't find it, to justify what it is that leads them to that conclusion. And equally, if they do find it, justify what it is that led them to that conclusion. That's very, very important because you want to be able to hold them to account to those things and see how it is that they came up with those kinds of conclusions. So things are getting better. Try not to lawyer up. If you have to lawyer up, you really need to find somebody who knows about these things and to get the kind of mental health help that families can use as evidence of providing good support. Fight like hell for equal parenting. Fight like hell so that your kid gets an equal share of time with you and the other parent, and that both of you have equal say in how to raise that child, equal decision-making capability. I think those are the best things that I can offer as help. And of course, if you can't afford it, you have to give up more in other areas in order to get your child into the best possible family situation that you can get them in. That's just the nature of the reality we live in.
Right. That's all great advice. 100%. And I also know that there's some cases where people lose sole custody at trial, and then they take it to appeals, and maybe it gets reversed. So, there are recourses. But of course, what you're saying is absolutely right. You should never really go to court over these situations. I mean, the reality is that a judge is a random individual making huge decisions about your life who can't possibly understand in a short amount of time all of the ramifications and all of the people involved, and are incredibly biased. I mean, we have in the U.S. with the Supreme Court, a lot of times decisions are equally split. So that just shows how much bias there could be on any one topic. So you're really putting your fate in the hands of something very random. The unfortunate aspect of this is you really only need one party to be uncompromising for it to go to court. And I think that people forget, especially if there's breakups or divorce and they're angry and they're hurt, they're thinking about it from a vindictive point of view, But they're not thinking about the fact that the reality is that you have to be a parent for 18 plus years, or really forever. And you have to deal with that person forever. And I think that's one thing where even the lawyers and stuff, maybe they benefit financially, this and that. But at the end of the day, even if there is an order that comes down, there's a million different things that you will face with that child, because that child, as it gets older, may act out and rebel, may get sick, may have problems in school, may not like the parent that has sole custody. There's so many changes that go on over those years that I don't think are anticipated. And the reality is you're kind of fighting for little crumbs on the table when there could be huge battles down the road that have to be waged, where you as a parent have to make decisions. And one sad story I heard of is where a daughter almost died because both parents, the child was sick, and both parents gave the child a medicine, and because they weren't communicating properly, the child was getting double the dose. So there's insanity out there where there's so much fighting just to be right, to win something, and really how, what is the victory in all of this madness?
Well, you're right on all of those counts. It's really troubling to hear that, parents can't communicate even about something as important as medicating a child. I wanted to say that, many judges out there who sit on the family court don't want to make these decisions. They know that somebody has to do it and they're willing to do it. They don't want to do it. There's a book that was written by a family court judge, Harvey Brownstone, called Tug of War. And he explains quite clearly that, when people sit in front of his courtroom, he knows that, they can't get along, but boy, they can't be smart either, because if they're giving over this hugely important decision to an individual who knows nothing about the family, nothing about the child or the circumstances, and is going to make long-term important decisions for them, that's a problem. So don't do it. Don't go to court.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about like a call to action. In other words, like what can people do about this? I mean, obviously, parental alienation is a bad thing. We've got, some issues in the court system that aren't fair. There's biases in, the legal system, with police, all this stuff. I want to leave on a positive note and just not give people a sense of hopelessness. So, what can people do on an individual basis to help this cause?
Well, it's a great question. And I think it's not arguable as the best thing you can do is become aware, educate yourself, read about other people's experiences, other people's thoughts about the issues, what they can tell you about the circumstances and the groups that you're going to be encountering. I think you can't learn enough about that. When you do learn something about it, you'll be somewhat more prepared for the rabbit hole that you might fall down into. So educate yourself. There's a lot available. You just have to look for it. The second thing is to join other people that are in similar situations. I think talking about these things gives everybody a perspective that they otherwise might not have had, and discussing how to solve the issue, how to work around these problems is a very helpful thing. So support groups are extremely good. This may not be an objective perspective, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. Join the Canadian Association for Equality. We do a lot of educating. We do a lot of advocacy work. And number one, as I said earlier, you can't be too educated. You owe it to yourself and to your kids to educate yourself. The second thing is that we do a lot of advocacy. So when you find yourself in the rabbit hole, talk about it. If you've got an ex-partner that is really abusive, shed a light on it. And it doesn't have to be just abuse toward you. It can be abuse toward your kid as well. All of these things fester when they're held in the dark. Shining a light on them, making them accessible to other people around, could embarrass the person, but more probably will help other people to talk to that person and get them to stop doing it. Um, those are really the things. And above all, take care of yourself. Make sure that your physical, emotional, and mental health is up to scratch. And again, one of the things that helps many people with that is to advocate, because when you're advocating, you're not just doing it for yourself, although you are doing it for yourself, you're doing it for other people as well, and that's very helpful. That's consoling in many ways and therapeutic. So take care of yourself.
Those are all great points, Robert. And one thing I like to add is that, I think that women more naturally are supportive of each other, and that as men we find it hard to kind of do that, and to realize that it's not only okay to support these types of causes and to support each other, but it's actually kind of necessary to sort of to take charge and to do that. And I feel as men that we spend a lot of time kind of handling things internally. I mean, obviously that's probably one of the things that leads to a lot of these suicides and stuff that we spoke of, and that to provide yourself an outlet to be okay to talk about issues. And we spoke to the attorney Brian in another interview that will be posted, and one of the things he said about your site was that there was a lot of information, like you said, on the site and things like that. And I think when you read about other people going through similar situations, and you'll feel empowered, and and like you said, do something about it, because when you do something about it, you will help other people. And I think that will make you feel good, and don't kind of be hamstrung by the idea that because you're a man, that you can't express your feelings, that you realize that there's things that you face in life, and it's okay to become one with that, and to understand that, and to talk to other people about that.
Yep, all of that's true. And James, you're doing a fantastic job here. It's a tremendous thing that you're helping people understand these things. You're reaching out to them. More people will become aware. Kudos to you, buddy.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate that. And, the way I look at it is, if you can even pump a little bit of something into the system, and what I mean is your ecosystem that helps somebody out. If you even reach one person that watches something and it opens up their mind and makes them realize things, media and things like that are a very powerful platform. And if I'm able to help anybody, with these type of interviews and give some people some knowledge and stuff like that, then, I'm contributing in a positive manner. And to me, that's a very satisfying and virtuous thing to do in life. And as you well know, more important than money and other things in life really is the legacy you leave behind, and how you contribute, to the environment around you. So I think I'm driven by that, and I feel that as somebody that is given certain gifts, whatever those gifts are, for me, I think that I'm gifted in the ability of to obviously having an entertainment background and things like that. So if I am able to use my gifts to help the world, that's a positive thing. And everybody has different things. Not everybody can speak on camera. Not everybody can do this or that. But maybe you can contribute financially to this organization. Maybe you can be a mentor. Maybe you can be somebody that you're an attorney, and maybe you can donate some legal time, or you can contribute in some other fashion. And any way that you can contribute to the betterment of society, hey, what better can you do than that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And some people recognize their abilities, and even if they do, it takes other people to actually carry through and do it. So kudos to you for doing it, not just for having the ability to do it.
Thank you, sir. Well, to me, it would be I always thought to myself, one of the worst things in life is to really have regret, and the other thing would be to have the ability to do something and not do it, because well, it's just you're kind of wasting you're kind of wasting those abilities. So can you please give any information out on, like, you know, where people should go from a resource point of view? Again, the website, if there's anything else that information that people may need to know, or to contact you personally, or if there's, you know, any kind of things that you kind of want to throw out there and promote.
Well, certainly our website is equalitycanada.com, and we have both an advocacy side and a services side. Canadian Centre for Men and Families have a lot of services for individuals. That's mainly based in and around Toronto, although we're expanding to Calgary and other cities. We do advocacy work throughout the country: Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, Halifax. We have branches in all of those cities, and we do work there. So that's one place to go. There are organizations that are around to help people who are in conflict, in family disputes. The FDRIO, Federation for Dispute Resolution, I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but FDRIO, you'll find them on the web. The library is a great source, obviously, as many other places are. But, you know, there are some certain individuals who do fantastic work, have published a great deal. You know Brian Ludmer, Ludmer. He's written a great deal. He's advocated a great deal, educated online and in various other forums. He's a great guy to start with. A fellow by the name of Richard Warshak, who's written a number of books and is probably the foremost authority in the world on parental alienation, is a tremendous place to go. Amy J.L. Baker. Look her up on the internet. And the last one that I'll give, although there are many others, is Dr. Craig Childress. Dr. Craig Childress. He has a website with a lot of published material, excuse me, as well as a whole bunch of YouTube videos that are extremely informative and very easy to watch. So that's a little bit of a bibliography for people that want to catch up on stuff, and some of the other things that they might want to do if they're caught going down the rabbit hole.
Absolutely, and it's important, you know, not to give up hope. No matter what your situation is, there's always ebbs and flows in life, and as bad as things look, there's always, you know, another time in the future, and it's not always going to be like it is right now. So, you know, I want to thank you personally, Robert, because, you know, this isn't something you have to do, and you got involved in this, and obviously it's a mission of yours, and you invest a lot of time and effort into it. And, you know, I appreciate that from a citizen point of view, that you're helping out and helping out our society. Thank you.
Thank you for saying so, James. Appreciate the opportunity to talk here with you.
Okay, great. Signing off, and take care, guys.